I've met up with JT here on the Siemens booth at Distributech. JT, when I was with your colleagues over at European Utility Week back in November, the role of software was a huge topic and is
Absolutely.
at Siemens.
It is, yeah.
Now, I went through many with Sabina and many of your colleagues, a lot of the Internet of Energy, Mindsford Application Center. One thing I hadn't come across was integrated planning.
Yes, sir.
What is this?
So Gavin, great to meet you, man. Thank God you're over here on this side of the pond now. So integrated planning is a bit of a North American thing where in Europe, the planning functions around utilities is a little bit different than North America. Traditionally in North America, the way planning has been done is at a generation side, where we do resource and capacity planning, and then we have transmission planning, and we have distribution planning. Transmission planning and...
So three separate silos?
Three separate silos, yes. And the resource planning guys, their forecasting and function that they're trying to deal with is like 20 to 30 years out.
Okay.
Transmission planning is 5 to 10 years out. Distribution planning is 1 to 5 years out.
So the different time frames.
Timing frames are different. The loadings, the resource planners are really seeing from a centralized planning perspective how the capacity pushes through the transmission into the distribution. And the transmission planning is just trying to figure out how do we get the flows from the generation to the distribution. Distribution traditionally has been more worried about overloads and voltage violations, right? And so we're trying to bring those functions together. So now integrated planning, that's the big topic here, right? So integrated planning is this idea that as we add more renewables, especially down at the distribution level,
you've got all the battery storage and whatever DER across the board. Sorry.
That's right, DER, EVs, and anything that we can kind of throw in the category of a DER, right? Those functions now, all of a sudden, our generation isn't at the transmission level.
True.
And there's lots of benefits that you can do at the distribution level if you add, let's say, energy storage. Where energy storage now can also be used to fix problems at the distribution level.
Correct.
But it can also provide spinning reserves and reserve functions at the resource and transmission level, right? It can also decongest your transmission system, right? So now all of a sudden, instead of having these three planning functions uncoordinated using different models and different time frames, integrated planning is really around this concept of when we do resource planning, we almost need to start from the bottom up. Instead of coming from the top down, we need to develop a forecast and a plan at the distribution level that we can roll up to our transmission level that now we can use to see how much we have to offset from a resource or a capacity planning from that centralized perspective, right?
Because I'm working with some utilities and TSOs and stuff in Europe, I know for a fact that there are certain, let's say, TSO to DSO connections where the energy was always flowing from the TSO down.
That's right.
And then suddenly it's a very sunny day, there's a hell of a lot of solar panels, or it's windy and the wind turbines are all going. The DSO is actually feeding back into the TSO.
That's right, and that's not the way we plan if we do this top-down approach, right?
Yeah.
And then so now we're trying to marry together our operational planning, that's what you just described, right? How it's flowing forward to our long-term planning function, right? So how can the long-term planning guys really forecast and see the behavior of our system unless we do this integrated approach where all three functions kind of feed off of each other and they need to be synchronized. But now one of the interesting topics that we get into in this kind of discussion is, but JT, how can we actually come up with a 20-year forecast for distribution?
I was going to say, because nobody's had batteries or EVs out there for 20 years.
Yeah, so now we get into all this kind of social engineering kind of concepts about who's likely to adopt solar.
How many people will buy an EV?
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be very dependent on neighborhoods, right? Certain neighborhoods are going to be more enabled to do buying EVs or to add solar to their house, and so you're going to have concentrations that aren't even. So the idea of just kind of spreading peanut butter across everything doesn't work as we get in. It works initially like now at a lot of utilities because its mainly model is negative load. But as you get more and more penetrations, it becomes more and more, the grid becomes more unreliable, if you will, right?
Well, you could probably do it at a country level because it's just you're thinking copper plate, right?
That's right.
Whereas once you get down into the feeder level and the interconnection level, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's a whole different ballgame now, right? And so we're really trying to figure out how do we do that. And so this idea or concept of bottom-up planning where we actually can take, and even if we're not right, but we have a 20-year forecast based on weather and socioeconomic type of data around somebody, we can predict a 15 to 20-year distribution forecast. It might not be correct in 15 years, but at least we're using the same forecast for all the planning functions, right?
True, because I hadn't thought of that, because the generation guys could be pulling the data from God knows what. They're a different model.
Their forecast isn't any better than any distribution one we're going to come up with, right? But at least it's one we all stick to. And so that's the bigger target of what we're trying to impact. Because if we're not right, we're at least closer than we would have been if we hadn't done that.
And if I ask, so today you'd have the generation, the transmission, the distribution. They'll have different systems, different silos.
Correct.
How does this pull it together? Do you replace everything, or all goes to the cloud?
So that's the other side of it, right? So we talk about software. How does software actually enable or disable it? Well, in the past, our planning functions had 3 different types of software. Had software that was optimized for capacity and resource planning, integrated resource planning kind of studies, we had transmission planning, and we had distribution planning. Well, Siemens, with our SynCal product, we're actually able to model both distribution and transmission as a single model. And we can actually tie those models together. So traditionally, a transmission system is modeled as a 3-phase balanced electrical system, and distribution is very much unbalanced. The other thing that we start to see as the grid becomes higher and higher penetrations of renewables is we unbalance the transmission system. So now
the TSO guys won't like that.
TSO guys do not like that idea, right? And it scares the bejesus out of a lot of us, right? So, but if we know that that's going to happen, and if we can actually convert our 3-phase balance model using a bottoms-up approach, we actually know what the unbalance is to both the P and Q values of our flows at the transmission level. Now SynCal can actually emulate what that is at an unbalanced value in the transmission system. And then we can also add into a time series forecasting. So now we're doing time series load flows. So we're not doing complete state estimation, but we're getting closer and closer approximations. So instead of doing like a summer only forecast or a winter, kind of traditional planning functions where you'd only pick a couple of times that you're critical, with renewables you really don't know when that's going to happen. Right? Because it's going to be very weather dependent.
It could be a storm
temperature
come in,
dependent.
it's cloudy for 2 weeks, whatever, right?
Exactly, and that the time of day is going to be different. All the load shifts can change. So we really also need to go away from single points in time, but really series in time analysis, right? So how do we actually do a 24/7 in a block, or how do we actually do 365 24/7?
Wow. So
SynCal is able to do that for us,
Take it to a whole new level?
Whole new level. But it's a very North American kind of thing currently, because of the way the processes work with a different TSO, DSO model, but I think it'll spread around the world as it becomes more advanced and the benefits we start proving out.
Wow. Now, I've seen another demo here earlier, one of your colleagues.
Absolutely.
So I'll be chatting to him later in the week where we drill into looking at the actual models and the voltage changing and. So, hey, thank you very much.
Hey, great to meet you.